Hello and welcome back to part 2 of the IP control CLI usage. And where we left off last time was the import of 100 routers. We went through the command line interface guide for importing the routers themselves, the network elements, and then performing that on the command line shell, which should be the video just immediately preceding this. What we need to do though in the follow-up step, and what this video will cover today, is attaching those routers as device containers to a container in the hierarchy so that we can ladder discover and go in and perform some other functions to this. So to begin with, a couple of things that are possible through IP control that might be easier and to help you in this process is to somewhat build out what the container structure should look like and how your device container should be attached. Now in this particular instance, because I have all of these hundreds, I'm going to go ahead and import them all into a container under the Georgia lab and then use that as kind of my base container structure for the devices or the network elements. So to do that, under first, you would go to management and then your container maintenance. And what I'm going to do, because it follows basically the same allocation rules or provisioning rules as the Atlanta VO 0928 container does, I'm just going to clone it, make it real simple. And I'll call this one Georgia routers. And I'm going to leave everything else intact because it has effectively everything else that I want in this particular level of the hierarchy. Okay, and that includes down into the device container or device objects and their APIs and user-defined fields, and also to the block type information templates in those fields. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. That'll finish that off. And then I'll have effectively the Georgia routers. Now, what I recommend from here, especially when dealing with large numbers of routers, is to effectively create the device container. And we could, I think, duplicate this one as well. Let's not do that. Let's go ahead and do it here. Let's create a new child container. And let's make it number 001, which was our first in that list. From here, if we have any kind of information templates we want to attach to this particular container, we can. Or we can leave these blank and you can selectively pick and choose. What we do need to see are the valid block types, and I think in this particular case, if we were limiting these down to the ones that we were working with, we would select management, VoIP, and then also data. Now, in case we skip any, we might be able to do an any there, but just be cautious that that will set it as an any type, and you may have to go back and modify it at a later time. The allow allocation of a parent, the allow root block are not applicable to a device container. And what is applicable, though, is a device container user-defined fields. So we'll set these to our block VLANs, which we are using, and we'll do that for the three types. Device information templates, when you get into the IP addresses, if you're managing things at this container level, you would want to set these as well there. I'm going to go ahead and just save this, though. And then what that's going to give us is, after a refresh, we'll see router 001. Now, we should, if you had just finished that other video, you should still be in the shell and actually in the opt-in control CLI directory. If you are, there's an export container command that allows you to filter on the name and then to specify a file name that you want to save this as. So I already have a file out there, so I'm going to do this as the router 001, and then I'll do temp router 001 CSV. From here, once you have that file, you want to go ahead and SCP that back to your, Excel or wherever you can go out and work with the data in your environment at that process. And of course, it's waiting for my prompting here for the username and password. So let me go ahead and save that. So I hope you're here in the files now. I see router 001. I'm just going to go ahead and download this. And then what I want to do is I'm going to open this up. And I effectively want to grab this line. So I want to grab this line. And then what I also want to do, and I'm going to go ahead and open up one of the template files. And this is where you would have, potentially a XLS CSV file that you're going to use for the template. So we mentioned this in the previous video. And what you can effectively do once you take that export data, you can just copy it into the format file that'll show you the fields to make sure everything lines up. Highlighting everything, you can then expand that to the size of the columns by double clicking. So what we'll have effectively is the router name, which is going to be the container name, And the key here is the parent, and the parent is the name of the container that we're going to attach these to. All right. So when we go back and look, and again at IP control, GA routers is the parent, and we're going to attach them here. Let me go ahead and delete this one while I'm at it. Okay. Secondly, what you'll see here then is the name. So this is how that name will be listed. The type that you want to specify here is device, and that represents a device container. There's two types: logical, which looks like the file folder; device is the glyph, the bluish glyph. Now, Rule 1 tells it that of the block types that are valid, and what are their user-defined fields. So the block type is a slash denoted, so any/data, a bar, and then block VLAN fields is the user-defined field set. So data, bar, block field set goes together, and then you have a slash, and then the next block type and the next information template, and so on and so forth. And you would do that repeating for each of your block types and their user-defined fields. Rule number 3 is effectively which block types it's going to go up and allocate from. So it's going to go up and look for these in the allow parent. And then for your device types, it uses all of these device types by default. Now the rest of this, you can just pretty much keep as is. And then what we effectively want to do now is duplicate this for those 99 other containers. So this is actually very easy to do when you're dealing with sequential naming and so forth. But if you're not, this can be a little bit of work. So a couple of things you might want to look into are some decent scripting tools, PowerShell, Python, Perl, etc. Something that would help you format these if you needed to, and to have it create the format for you. Otherwise, Excel works fine, just for what we're trying to do here. So now, once that's complete, we should just go ahead and save this off. And I'll go ahead and pick the right folder this time. And I want to do test import dev containers and CSV. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close this so we don't have any locks. And now for importing the container, you can still import the container from the command line. However, there's also an import wizard, so we'll go ahead and do that here to make that a little simpler. And what we'll do is select import container. We're not going to overwrite, but if we wanted to, we could overwrite and modify the containers. I am going to go ahead and select this though, so let's see if we can find the correct import and then upload this. IP control then does a performance or check on the fields to make sure they line up. You can visually see this as well, and it'll tell you whether it failed or whether that was successful. All of the imports can be run either immediately or at some type of scheduled interval in the future. We're going to do this immediately. And once that's submitted, it shouldn't take too long to import, 100, even 1,000 containers. Relatively quick, maybe a minute or two once I get started. And we'll let this run for a minute. And then what we should expect to see after this is a list of all of the containers, all of the devices and routers, and we can then effectively go in and discover the data to pull the interface names and the subnets. So even if you're looking at from, say, an evaluation perspective and how do you obtain the data in your environment, importing, exporting the data, this is a great way to do it. And a quick way to do this so that we can perform kind of a global discovery, understand what all of the routers and subnets are, and then manipulate that to organize it perhaps in a better format for you in that environment. So now that the import's complete, ran without any errors, your next step would be effectively to discover. So under Management Discovery, you would select the Discover Router Subnets, and you can either do this one element at a time, searching selectively each element, or you can do it based on the container, which in this case could be Georgia routers. And that would then create a discovery task with all of those individual routers, so 99 of them, and it will run through each one, generate a reject and error file, and a differences file that can then be imported, and we can do this all at one time. Okay. And the result of that, and I'm not going to run that because I will fail here in this environment, but the result of that though is that you'll see a flag that says complete with errors. If you click into it, you'll see all of the found interfaces, their subnets, and as long as you have the root networks that support these individual subnets and they're not currently in use, you can effectively just say import snapshot and tell it to import these, which will attach to the interface, and further look into, say, the differences to understand where that difference is either in the router, meaning configured, or in IP control is the planned. So that's, I think, should wrap up video 2. About the same length as the other, I guess. We'll try to keep these short. And in the next video, I'll go over maybe a scenario where you cannot discover this information and you want to track the interface names and how you can import those through the command line and using the CLI. So join me again on video 3, and we'll see you there. Take care.